What's up, everybody? Today I'm going to be sharing with you what to expect when you arrive in the airport in Managua, Nicaragua as of 2019, okay? So, first off, it's a pretty small airport, not that hard to get lost. Also, don't expect anybody to know English there. Some of the employees sometimes know a little bit of English, but in general, the people here speak Spanish. And in Managua, in particular, most people speak Spanish, whereas in some other like more touristy areas, English is more common. But when you first arrive in Managua, don't expect the people you interact with to know English, okay? That being said, there's not really a whole lot that can go wrong as long as you have some basic things covered, okay? So, one of those things is you need $10 in cash in order to pay the fee as a tourist to get your visa, even though technically it's visa on entry. So it's a little bit confusing because if you are like a US or European citizen, you get a visa by entering Nicaragua that allows you to stay for 90 days. But in order to get out of the airport, you also have to pay $10 for a little tourist card with a separate stamp on it. And it's a bit confusing because this tourist card will say that you have 30 days. In reality, this is just what is designed for all the other countries that don't have the 90-day automatic visa. So you're going to come into the country, you're going to get your visa and pay for this $10 one, and don't be confused because if you look at the paper visa, it says 30 days. The reality is if you are a US citizen or a European citizen, you actually have 90 days after the date on your passport of the stamp before your visa expires. So don't worry about that. I know it's a bit weird that you get two stamps and one's on this piece of paper and it looks like you need to keep track of the piece of paper. The reality is most of the time they never check, okay? So you have that $10 thing. That's the one thing that could go wrong, or the number one thing that could go wrong is you don't have $10 on you, okay? So make sure that you have $10. Now, the next thing is you're going to fill out a form. And this form is going to require an address of the place that you are staying, okay? This is really important because if you don't have an address, they're not going to let you in. You have to have an address, even if it isn't actually where you're going to stay. Or even if you change your mind, that is fine. It's a little bit silly, but you have to have an address. So I encourage you before your trip, like right now or whatever you're doing, if you are planning on going to Nicaragua, before your flight there, just find a hostel, get the address of the hostel, and write it down. This is going to save you time later, okay? They're really picky about this usually, so make sure that you have this address. As long as you have the address, then you're going to get through just fine. They're going to stamp you, and it's going to be okay. I was worried because when I was in Nicaragua last time, I overstayed my visa by like 6 or 7 months, and then I paid a fee in order to leave the country, right? So I was nervous that when I came back into the country, they wouldn't like that I did that because they can see it. It's evidence on my passport that I paid a fee for overstaying, right? In this case, it didn't even come up at all. They were only worried about the fact that I didn't know the exact address of where I was staying. They kept asking, and I was like, Bologna? So I ended up having to call my friend and get the exact address. So one quick note about addresses in Managua is that they are often relative to landmarks. For example, my address is close to Channel 2 News, which is one of the local news agencies in Nicaragua, right? So my address isn't like 114X on this street in Bologna. My address is 2 blocks west of Channel 2, 100 meters north. Okay? And this is how most addresses are going to look. So don't be confused if you look up the addresses online and they look like they're in a weird different format. That's normal for Nicaraguan addresses. Most of them are relative to more major landmarks that people know about. In this case, Channel 2 News. Okay? So, as long as you have your $10 and you have the address of the place you're staying at, you're going to be fine. You don't even need to know any Spanish. You're just going to get through. it is important to understand that you need that address and you need those $10. As long as those two things are good, you're going to be fine. The other thing that could go wrong, but is less likely, is that there is a problem with something you're bringing into the country. Essentially, the way it works is you arrive on the plane, you get off the plane, you follow the people, you go through you turn in like you get a little form to fill out. So you have to fill that form out. Then you go through customs. You're going to show them the form. They're going to look at your passport. They're going to look at your form to make sure you have the address. And then they're going to stamp your passport after taking your $10 for the thing. They're also going to give you a tourist card and stamp that tourist card. And then you're going to proceed to go get your baggage if you had any. You're going to pick up your bags if you had any, and then you're going to go to the exit. Right before you leave the airport, they're going to x-ray all of your belongings. So this is the part where you could get iffy if you have something sketchy or something you're not supposed to have. For example, you cannot have a drone. You can't bring drones into Nicaragua. So there are ways to like smuggle them in on buses and you're less likely to get checked and these kind of things. But you should assume that if you bring a drone into the airport, it's going to be confiscated. They're going to let you into the country, but they're going to take your drone, okay? Also, if it looks like you are bringing in goods for commercial use, like you have a whole bunch of new laptops with you, they're going to make you pay tariffs or something like this on these goods. You're allowed to bring in goods for personal use. So if you are bringing things in for friends or something like this, it's usually better to take them out of their box so that they're not brand new, because then it's easier to argue like, oh, you know, it's just for my friend, whatever, it's fine. Honestly, the chance of this kind of stuff happening is unlikely. The two most likely problems are, one, you don't have your $10, and two, you don't have an exact address of a place you're going to stay. And remember, the place you're going to stay, you can change your mind as soon as you leave the airport. It's no problem. There's no system to check and make sure you actually went where you said. Just make sure that you're giving them an address of a place that does exist and is still in business. A lot of places, especially hostels, are closed now because like 60–70% of the tourism industry in Nicaragua just like crashed after the political events. So that's relevant to understand, but as long as you have that address, you're going to be fine. So once your bags are scanned, they may ask you some questions about like what you're doing, that kind of thing. In my experience, they're not super diligent at this point. Like, there have been times where they've asked me something about what's in my bag and I don't understand what they're saying and I just struggle a little bit. And I'm like, lo siento, no entiendo. And then they just shrug and let you go. Like, that's kind of pretty common. It's really casual, usually. So just make sure that you're not bringing anything crazy. You don't have any guns or anything like this, or any drones or any bombs or flammable stuff. And yeah, you should be fine. So then they'll x-ray your bags, you'll get out of the conveyor belt, and then you will leave the airport and immediately be bombarded by a bunch of people trying to get you to get a taxi. In general, this is going to be a recurring experience when you're in Managua. Like, as soon as you get off a bus that's a popular location, people are going to be like, taxi, taxi, taxi. In general, you want to avoid these pushy taxi drivers because they're going to charge you a lot more, and they're also more likely to be aggressive. Not always, but there are a lot of aggressive drivers in Managua, and like car crashes and these kind of things are real. So you do want to be a little bit picky, especially regarding taxis, because there are taxis everywhere. You're not going to be in a situation where you say no to a taxi and then you have to wait like 10–15 minutes for the next taxi. Like, I've been in situations where I stop and like 4 taxis pull up. Like, that happens. There's plenty of taxis. You don't need to worry about it at all. Okay? So, again, to recap, you will need $10. You will need an address of the place you are staying, supposedly. And you will also need to make sure you're not bringing in drones or commercial stuff or anything dangerous. All right? Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Ciao!